What's happening, everybody? This time for real. Had a microphone issue or setting with the original post, but we're good to go now, or should be anyway. Let me let my Discord friends know. And there's lots to talk about today. We're starting to get our first couple of notes ahead of training camp. I know that the Jets report this week. They are playing in the Hall of Fame game, and they're also going to be on Hard Knocks this year, so they're getting into camp. I believe rookies report for a few teams this week, so we're finally starting to get a few little tidbits here and there, a couple of headlines. We're inching ever closer to football season. Happy to have you all along for the ride. Welcome to another episode of Facemask Fantasy. There are some wide receiver rankings to get to today for sure, but there are also some news and notes about the running backs. Been a lot of talk about running backs the past few days because yesterday was a big day. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley do not sign their franchise tag deals. So as of right now, the expectation is they will hold out. Let me delete the old link. All right, now we're off and running. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley do not come to a long-term agreement with their teams, which is what they obviously wanted all along. Therefore, the expectation is they will not report with the rest of their team when the Giants and Raiders report to training camp next week. Their availability for week 1 of this season is officially in jeopardy. How much you believe that will actually come to pass is you can kind of weigh the pros and cons yourself, or you can kind of weigh the potential outcomes yourself. This doesn't happen a lot, but also now we're seeing the running back market isn't anywhere close to what it used to be. Teams are not willing to pay running backs what they feel they're worth. And now we have a significant standoff on our hands between two very high-profile marquee names in Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs and the teams that they play for. So those teams have a big problem on their hands, but the running backs have a big problem on their hands too. This issue is not going away, where running backs are getting paid significantly less than players that play other positions. Tony Pollard is another name who was slapped with the franchise tag earlier this offseason. He did sign that, so he will play for the Cowboys on the franchise tag for 1 year, somewhere north of $10 million. I think it's around 10.4-ish, 10.1, 10.4, somewhere around there. Pollard is not expected to hold out. He signed the franchise tag, and especially now, it would not behoove him to hold out because since he agreed to it, since he signed it, he could be fined by the Cowboys if he didn't report. Saquon and Josh Jacobs can't be fined by the Giants and by the Raiders because they haven't agreed to anything. They haven't put pen to paper on anything. So we're in a holding pattern for at least another couple of weeks, most likely with both of these guys. Because if they couldn't come to an agreement at the deadline, are we to believe that that's going to change now that that deadline has passed? This is a big problem for running backs moving forward. What's going on, Crumply Heads? Good to see you. Nice return on that A.J. Brown trade. 4 first-round picks is worth the price of throwing a second-round pick in there just to get the deal done. I like the return on a rebuilding team. Now you got lots of flexibility on what you want to do moving forward for the next couple of years. I have a rebuilding dynasty team myself. I've been selling a couple of players off. Just earlier this offseason, I traded Isiah Pacheco for a first-round pick. And, not that I didn't see this coming, not that I was aware that this was a possibility, but Sleeper just dropped a little note that Isiah Pacheco may start the season on the PUP list. That's a maybe. It's not a definitive thing yet, which would mean that he has to miss the first 6 games of the season. We'll get to him in a bit. For now, we'll continue to talk quickly about Saquon and Josh Jacobs. There are plenty of fantasy pundits. There's plenty of people out there who I feel like they're kind of batting an eye at this, and the expectation remains that Saquon and Josh Jacobs will just show up. They'll just report. We don't have too much to lean on as far as prior history of players sitting out into the season. Le'Veon Bell, of course, did it, almost famously now at this point with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think going into the 2018 season, refused to play on the franchise tag, never showed up, wanted a long-term deal, sat out the entire season, waited until the following year when the Jets gave him a contract. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time this happened in any type of circumstance was Melvin Gordon with the Chargers during the 2019 season, just 1 year later. Gordon held out. He sat out for the first month of the season, I believe. It was the first 4 weeks of the season he sat out. But he eventually reported to the team, and he played for the Chargers on the last year of his rookie deal, I think from week 5 onward. The difference between those two situations is that Le'Veon was in a situation then similar to what Saquon and Josh Jacobs are in now. He was slapped with the franchise tag by the team, didn't want to play on just the franchise tag, wanted a long-term deal, wanted the stability that comes with an NFL contract, regardless of how much guaranteed money there is, this, that, and the other thing. Le'Veon sat out because he wanted the long-term stability, and Pittsburgh, he felt at least, wasn't willing to pay the price that he was worth. Sat out the entire season. James Conner went on to have an RB1 season for fantasy purposes, had a great season for the Steelers. Le'Veon signs with the Jets the following offseason and was never the same. The difference between that situation and this situation, or excuse me, the difference between the Le'Veon Bell situation and the Melvin Gordon situation in 2019 was that Melvin Gordon held out while he was still on his rookie contract. And a year on your contract on your rookie contract doesn't vest if you don't report. So it was more posturing from Melvin Gordon's perspective. That situation was always significantly more likely that he was actually going to show up, that he was actually going to play, because if he wanted to get to free agency, he had to play out in some capacity the final year of his rookie contract. So those were yes, both backs held out, but those were two different scenarios from the perspective of what Le'Veon Bell's leverage was and what Melvin Gordon's leverage was. Gordon didn't have that much leverage. He sat out for a month to preserve himself, but ended up reporting, I think, around week 5 or week 6, and played that final season on his rookie deal with the Chargers before the Broncos signed him the following offseason. Melvin Gordon didn't report late while on the franchise tag. He reported late while on his rookie contract. The situation that Le'Veon Bell was in back in 2018 is what Saquon and Josh Jacobs have now. There's real smoke here that at least one of these dudes holds out for a significant chunk of the season. If the Giants or the Raiders, respectfully, are not budging on their offer to these guys, and they feel strongly enough that they're not getting paid anywhere close to what they're worth, and therefore they're not going to put their bodies on the line, the possibility is very real that these guys, both of these guys are top, say, 25 picks in one quarterback leagues, and both clear RB1s from a running back ranking perspective. There is a good chance these guys do not play in 2023. It really comes down to, on what personal level do these guys care about going out there, suiting up, playing, putting up the numbers, creating some type of legacy for themselves in the NFL. Like, we're talking about intangibles at this point that are specific to the individual. We can't quantify these things. You can't put these things on a chart and compare it to other situations and just try to make a prediction. This is just up to Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, and nobody outside of their inner circle can sit here and make a prediction about, oh, he'll show up by week 4. He'll show up by week 5. He'll want to play. He'll get that itch to want to return. Maybe that's speculation. If this was the final year of their rookie deals, then yeah, I would sit here and definitively tell you, buy the dip, because people are going to let them slide a little bit in drafts, Saquon and Josh Jacobs, but eventually they're going to have to report if they want that last year of their rookie deal to vest, to actually play out so that they can get to free agency. Saquon and Josh Jacobs can both sit out the year this year and still get to free agency in 2024. That is a real possibility that can happen. And again, on top of that, talking about running backs as a whole, this issue is not going away anytime soon. The current collective bargaining agreement for the NFL runs through 2030. That's 7 more years. We are going to see a lot of unhappy running backs between now and then. Probably a guy like Jonathan Taylor just next year. So I would caution not just redrafters, but dynasty players for sure. Be careful about the running backs that you invest in. And it's an unfortunate game that we have to play when it pertains to fantasy. But if you're looking at getting a guy who is either headed for free agency next year or could be hit with the franchise tag next year, I think that's Jonathan Taylor. That's DeAndre Swift. It's the 2020 draft class. So if you're thinking about investing in a guy in Dynasty or, say, a keeper league even, who came out of the 2020 draft class, I would be careful with those running backs. Now, Jonathan Taylor, especially in redraft leagues, you don't worry about it because he's playing this year. He's on the last year of his rookie deal. He has to finish this season out to get to free agency, no matter what he's thinking, no matter what he necessarily cares about or doesn't care about. Jonathan Taylor is a safe investment this coming season for redraft purposes. But him and DeAndre Swift and other guys from the 2020 draft class who are going to be free agents next year and are probably going to want to get more money from these teams than the teams are willing to pay, I would be awfully careful about the guys that you invest in for dynasty purposes and, to that extent, keeper league purposes as well. Because this issue is not going away. For another 7 years, we have this CBA. This collective bargaining agreement runs through 2030. Running backs are going to be fighting this losing battle for the next more than a half decade. It's tough. From a fantasy football perspective, from a dynasty perspective, from a keeper league perspective, trying to identify some of these guys that you want to invest in for your teams. You might just like a guy from a profile perspective, from what he can do on the field perspective, but if these backs don't get what they feel like they're worth, and more likely than not, they're not going to get it because teams have adjusted. NFL front offices, GMs are not paying running backs anymore. So I would be incredibly nervous if I had Saquon Barkley in Dynasty. I have Josh Jacobs in a Dynasty league that I intend to compete in. I'm a little worried he's just not going to show up this year. What incentive does he have? He's not going to get what he feels like he's worth. And both of these guys are on the record saying we're not looking to reset the running back market. I have no reason not to believe that. But if they're not even getting what they think is a reduced cost from their perspective, if they can't even get that, we're talking about the position that probably takes the biggest physical toll, or one of them at least anyway, on the field. It's them and, guys along the offensive line and defensive line, because those two positions are crashing into each other on every other play, or every play. It's them and running backs. Running backs are the ones that take the physical pounding game after game, week after week, season after season. More so than other positions. So they're put in a really difficult position because it's been deemed, and everything supports this, unfortunately, it's been deemed the most replaceable position on the field. It's more replaceable than a kicker. And the proof is in, the average salary there. So it's a tough spot for these guys. I feel terribly for the running backs who are trying to get paid and it's just not going to happen for them. You hope that they can come to some type of agreement with their teams, that Saquon and the Giants can figure something out, that Jacobs and the Raiders can figure something out. But if they didn't before the 4 p.m. deadline, which passed yesterday on Monday, I don't think we're going to see the teams, I'll just say either side in general, I don't think we're going to see either side cave off of their demands. Why would they? From a front office perspective, they feel like they can get, I'm just kind of off the cuff, they're hoping they can get 65, 70% of their star running backs production from their backups. And that's been proven to a fault, mostly be true. Meanwhile, from the running backs perspective, it's well, look at what our worth is to our offense, to our team. You rely on us. You spent high capital on us. Both were first-round picks. Saquon was the second overall pick back in 2017, I believe, or 2016. Different regimes for both teams, right? The coaches and GMs who made these selections are no longer with the teams. But that's not their fault. That's not their problem. Saquon didn't call the Giants and demand that he be made the second pick overall. Josh Jacobs didn't call the Raiders and demand to be made a first-round pick. Those teams made that choice, made that decision, made that investment. Now comes time to pay the piper. They don't want to do it. They want to get him at a severely reduced cost, less than what their production indicates they should get. And now we have this issue. I do think there is a legitimate concern that Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs do not report this year, and it does go by the way of Le'Veon Bell. The only thing that is keeping Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs from sitting out the entire season this year is if they look at that situation, they look at what happened with Le'Veon Bell, and they just decide that they don't want that to happen to them, right? Where they miss a year of production, they're not putting up their numbers. It depends on how much they care about. Do they want to be Hall of Famers? How badly do they care about their legacies in the NFL? That's a question that only they can answer. Do they look at the situation from Le'Veon Bell in 2018, where he sat out the season, ended up getting a contract from the New York Jets, but he wasn't the same from a production perspective for the rest of his career? Are they willing to potentially have that play out? Because on top of that, I don't think they're going to get what the Jets paid Le'Veon Bell the following season, next offseason. At this point, pretty much every single NFL team has adapted to this philosophy. We're just not going to pay running backs. There's a major issue with the position. It's something that's not going to get figured out. I think it's fair to say it's not going to get figured out until the next CBA. And this one doesn't expire for another 7 years. We're in for the long haul with these battles between star running back and team. I have I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to try to predict the future, but I would be willing to bet that we might run into a similar issue next year with Jonathan Taylor. To a lesser extent with guys like DeAndre Swift. Now, Jonathan Taylor is the more proven player, but we could see this play out next year. So, for everybody who plays Dynasty, for those who have you play in keeper leagues, I would be cautious about the running backs that you invest in those leagues. Redraft, you're fine. When you know that there's a guy who's going to play, he reported at training camp, you're probably not drafting until late August, early September anyway. You know the situation you're getting yourself into. You're fine. This kind of doesn't apply to you, really, unless you're take fantasy out of the equation and you're a fan of the team that the running back plays for. And then that's a different conversation for fantasy entirely. But for keeper league purposes, for dynasty league purposes, moving forward, the mantra, the philosophy has always been to invest in wide receiver first and running back second. I think the gap just got a whole lot wider. So Saquon deserves the money he's asking for. Josh Jacobs deserves the money he's asking for. I don't think either are going to get what they hope to get. I hope I'm wrong for their sake. But I think we really have to be prepared that we don't see either of those guys for week 1 of this season. Obviously, we've got still almost 2 months to go before the season actually begins, so there's plenty of time for things to change. The landscape in the NFL changes quickly. Headlines in the NFL change quickly. These guys could change their mind and decide that they want to show up and they are willing to take whatever offer the team is currently giving them. But today, right now, as you watch those guys slide in best ball drafts, or if you're doing a startup and you're watching these guys come in cheaper than you would expect, proceed with caution. Because while there's not a whole lot of evidence to go off of, it's fair to wonder what their future holds in the NFL, not from a talent perspective, but just from a willingness perspective to play under the contract that teams are actually willing to give them. So that's the situation with Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley. I mean, yeah, you could throw Tony Pollard in there next year as well because he'll be a free agent next year. It'll be interesting again to see what type of contract Tony Pollard can command from what is potentially his next team if it's not the Cowboys. A couple more notes with running backs. Alex, you already grabbed one of them. Kendre Miller has been put, I believe, on the non-football injury NFI, right? The NFI list to start camp. Certainly noteworthy. But I don't think we have, at least right now, that much more to go off of other than he's just been placed on the non-football injury. This isn't the PUP list for Kendre Miller. So his availability for week 1 is still very much in play. But if you're worried about these types of things, he's going to be behind the 8 ball in training camp. He's very clearly not going to be participating right away. So what I will say is, first of all, the Alvin Kamara suspension, while it is going to be something, I don't think it's going to be as severe as we expected it to maybe originally or earlier in this offseason because the felony charge that was being held against him stemming from that incident in Las Vegas last year has been dropped. So he's still going to get suspended because he did violate the NFL's code of conduct policy, but I think we're looking at a 4 to 6 game suspension, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it was on the 4-game end, which means it wouldn't be that long, all things considered. Especially when you factor in Kamara's ADP is like around 100. I mean, the guy who looks like a real winner, a big time value at cost right now is Jamal Williams. I don't think anybody's expecting him to duplicate what he did last year, scoring 17 touchdowns, 18 touchdowns. It was a ridiculous number. He's not going to do that again, but with Kendre Miller presumably on the sideline to start training camp, Jamal Williams with an ADP of 127 looks absolutely spectacular. I would take him 15 spots higher than that if I had to. If I felt like I needed a running back with an ADP of around 127, I'll go, if I start my draft wide receiver heavy and we're getting in the pick 110 range, hell yeah, smash on Jamal Williams. Because Kendre Miller's, for better or worse, not to make a mountain out of a molehill, because right now this is just a molehill, right? He's on the NFI list. It's not the PUP list. It's just a molehill. But as a rookie, you want those guys in there getting their reps, getting their experience with the plays, with the reads, with the calls, with the verbiage, the language that this team uses. You want them to get acclimated with all of that stuff on the field, in practice, not just in the film room, right? So I would say this is a twofold development. We can't sit here and say he's going to miss the first 6 games yet. It's just the NFI list. Again, non-football injury, so there's only so much to be concerned about, but it is something to note. I would say Kamara, 100 picks into your draft. If you feel like you can hold the fort down, if you ended up with an anchor running back with at least one of your first 2 picks, and then sprinkled in strong depth at least a couple other times over the course of the first 7 or 8 rounds, I'm fine taking Alvin Kamara 100 picks into your draft. That number is going to rise most likely closer to the season once we know the official suspension, because a 4-game suspension for Kamara right now is 100% the best case scenario from his availability perspective. We all thought that it could be significantly worse, but because that felony charge got dropped, an ADP of 100 for Kamara is looking pretty sweet right now. And then Jamal Williams, who that's the one dude in that backfield who we know is available week 1. Alvin Kamara is not playing week 1. We know that. It's just a matter of, is he playing week 5 or is he playing like week 7 or 8? Jamal Williams is playing week 1. ADP of 127, especially if you go a little light on running back to start your draft, I would take him 10, 15, maybe even 17, 18, 20 spots higher than what his current ADP is, if I need to lock in a running back because I went wide receiver heavy to start my draft. So, Alex, to answer your question, I'm not sure he misses the first 6 games. He's not on the PUP list yet. That would obviously be the slam dunk indicator. What I do know is we need to be hammering Jamal Williams in our drafts right now. And Kamara for while we're at it as well, because I think he's an incredible value right now. While people are still in limbo waiting to see the length of his suspension, I would be shocked if it's more than 6 games. Whether you agree with that or not is a different conversation entirely, but the felony charge got dropped, which was obviously the most severe thing that Kamara was dealing with this, with this legal off-field issue. Sounds like it's damn near like a settlement, essentially, out of court. He's paying for the medical bills of the victim. He's doing community service, this, that, and the other thing. I think we're looking at a 4 to 6 game suspension here. I'm willing to wait that out with an ADP of 100 with a guy like Kamara, even though advanced age, he didn't have a spectacular year by his standards last year, but the concern is so easily baked into his ADP right now. An ADP of like in that 9,500 range. I'll roll the dice on that with Kamara, and I'll absolutely roll the dice on Jamal Williams as well, because he looks like the dude, at least for week 1, that you're going to want to have. By the way, the Saints are at home week 1 against the Tennessee Titans, who were, I think, one of the worst defenses against the run in 2022. So go ahead and put Jamal Williams on your radar as a spot start at running back for week 1. You can go ahead and lock that in right now. The other piece of information we got earlier today was, again, just purely speculation. Chiefs running back Isiah Pacheco may go on the PUP list. That would guarantee he misses the first 6 games of the season. Pacheco had a couple of surgeries this offseason to address injuries that he picked up last year. Sounds like he's still recovering from that. He didn't participate in OTAs. That was all Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I guess Deneric Prince got in there as well. Now there's a rumor out there, or I guess it's more than a rumor. It was officially reported. Pacheco could miss the first 6 weeks of the season. He could be placed on the PUP list. To me, that's an easy fade at his ADP. I think he's got an ADP around 75-ish on Underdog Fantasy. I will confirm that for everybody right now. No, it's dipped. It's fallen. Isiah Pacheco's ADP is now around 86, so it's dropped 10 spots. That'll probably continue to drop. He's officially uncertain for training camp. Now, just to quote the blurb from that from RotoWire, quote, Andy Reid said Tuesday that the Chiefs will soon decide whether Pacheco is starting training camp on an injured list. They might place him on the PUP list. I'm paraphrasing this now. Doesn't mean much until the regular season. Of course, there's still plenty of time for Pacheco to be able to get healthy, get right, get himself on the field before week 1. But he did have a couple of, he got banged up pretty good last year, Isiah Pacheco, and it was kept under wraps for the most part because he played all through the playoffs and had a good Super Bowl. Broken hand, torn labrum. I mean, these aren't nothing. So he's still recovering from that. We'll see what his availability is. I'm not sitting here and saying hammer Clyde Edwards-Helaire in your drafts, but for what it's worth, Edwards-Helaire's ADP is all the way down south of 200. So whether you believe in the guy or not, and at this point it's totally fair to not believe in him anymore, but I mean, with an ADP of south of 200, he is a free roll of the dice, at least for the first couple weeks of the season. And if he can get into the end zone, maybe he can sell high. And selling high for him would maybe be getting Kendre Miller, who, I don't know. Obviously, CEH's stock is in the toilet. Pacheco clearly usurped him when healthy as the guy they'll lean on early down. And then they've got an intriguing player, Deneric Prince, I believe undrafted, right? Undrafted free agent. Going to see what he can do in camp. So while I think you can buy Kamara despite the expected suspension, I would be, Pacheco feels kind of icky right now. He was a fun player to watch last year. He was a fun player to have on your team last year, especially in the second half of the season. But this is obviously not a great development. He's been recovering from multiple surgeries he had this offseason. Now he's possibly going on the PUP list. I would be fading Pacheco at cost. If he slides 15 spots, if he slides 20 spots, sure, okay, fine. Take a shot in best ball here and there, but you're always playing with fire if you start drafting dudes injured who are already injured right off the bat. You're playing with some fire there. Theo, if you're competing, yeah, I would send the 206 for Jamal. I would. He's going to be the guy for the Saints week 1, no matter what, right? Kamara's not playing week 1. We know that, or we're pretty confident in that. And now Kendre Miller, at the very least, is going to be behind the 8 ball as far as getting up to speed in training camp. That doesn't mean that his season is lost, but I would be willing to bet that Jamal Williams is the guy in that backfield that you want for week 1. And in a matchup against the Tennessee Titans, well, I believe we're one of the worst run defenses in the NFL last year. Yeah, they struggled. Well, I mean, they've got a couple of good pieces on that line. Regardless, the Saints are at home in that game. I would be taking Jamal Williams. I would solidly bet Jamal Williams is a rock solid investment for a week 1 flex play or even RB2 potential week 1. So those are some news and notes about the running backs. I can talk shop on those or answer any questions if anybody wants to, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the wide receiver rankings for 2023. I got the top 12 for you today. I'll have wide receivers 13 to 24 on Thursday. My wide receiver 1 for the 2023 season. I'm going out on a limb here a little bit, but I'm just looking at the numbers and I cannot deny this. Obviously, health plays a factor with all of these guys. So that's just kind of an arbitrary, wasn't he hurt last year? Yeah, the injury potential for everybody is 100%. My wide receiver 1 for the 2023 season is Cooper Kupp. Slightly over Justin Jefferson, slightly over Jamar Chase. Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game last year, 14.5 PPR. I think it was somewhere, it was higher. It was around 20 in full PPR. Let me see if I can get that specific number. 20, yeah, over 22. And the only reason that number wasn't a little bit higher was because one of the games that he played in, he had was it minus 0.1 in that game? I think he had like a catch for a loss of 6 or something like that, and then he got hurt, and that was that. That was it for his season. I think after week 9 or so, week 10. Other than that, he was the safest wide receiver for the first 10 weeks of the season. Prior to missing time due to the injury. In half PPR, I think his low for scores for fantasy output last year on a per weekly basis was 13.2. Even Justin Jefferson had some rough outings last year. A 3-point outing, a 3-point fantasy point outing, 4.8. He had a really bad showing championship week in week 17. I'm not holding that against him. He's still excellent. But Cooper Kupp was, without question, on a per week basis. He wasn't the wide receiver 1 every single week. Obviously, Jefferson outperformed him several times, but Kupp's floor is ridiculous. And the Rams did damn near nothing to upgrade their wide receiver core this offseason. Kupp is back healthy. Matthew Stafford is back healthy. Sean McVay is still the head coach and basically the biggest offensive influence on the coaching staff. That's all there is to it. Kupp had a historic 2021, was on pace to have a historic 2022, got hurt in week 10, and that was it. On a bad Rams team that was floundering. Usually the Super Bowl hangover occurs to the losing team. Last year, it happened to the winning team. Football's funny that way. Stafford missed time in the offseason due to back issues. He's presumably healthy coming into this training camp this year. Kupp is healthy this year coming into training camp. The hangover is over. The Rams are back to full strength. As far as the Rams go, they're back to full strength. And Matthew Stafford doesn't really have anybody else in this offense to pepper with targets. Cooper Kupp is miles and miles away the best offensive weapon that team has. Look at his numbers on a per game basis. In half PPR, week 1 for Cooper Kupp, 25.3 points. Week 2, 26.3 points. Week 3, 14.4 points. Week 4, 19.2 points. Week 5, 22.4. Week 6, 13.2. Week 7 was his bye week. Week 8, 18.9. Week 9, 22.8. 10, he had a couple of catches, got hurt, and that was the rest of his season. He averaged over 18 points per game with a low in week 6 of 13. This dude is the safest player in fantasy football until further notice. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 3. I think he's being drafted as the 4th player overall. Christian McCaffrey is sneaking in there as well in the top 3 for one quarterback leagues. He's healthy. Stafford is healthy. This is a Rams team with, outside of Tyler Higbee, doesn't have a whole lot in the passing game in the pecking order. Stafford is going to lean on Kupp again. Why wouldn't he? You don't project a historic season any given year, but I mean, is he a threat to catch 140 balls again? Yeah. Is he a threat to catch 10 to 12 touchdowns? Yeah. Is he a threat to go over 1,400, 1,500 receiving yards? Yeah. And honestly, I feel like I'm giving him somewhere just above his floor. Cooper Kupp is the wide receiver 1 for 2023. Yes, there is a fair debate here because Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are both excellent. But when you factor in that from start to finish, games that Cooper Kupp started and finished, his low water mark was 13. You can't ask for more rock-solid, consistent production than what Cooper Kupp brings to the table, especially in a Rams offense that is, for the most part, lacking in other playmakers. Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 1. I know Justin Jefferson is the consensus wide receiver 1 on Underdog Fantasy, and Justin Jefferson is excellent. He's my wide receiver 2 for the season. But he did, when you are literally bulletproof, Cooper Kupp is bulletproof. Even Justin Jefferson had some clunkers last year. And that's not a knock on him. He's human. Week 2, in half PPR, 7.8 for Jefferson. Week 3, 2.9. Week 11, 4.8. Week 17, he had 2 points. He crushed people in the fantasy championships. And even if you play in week 18, if you play your fantasy championships in week 18, which you shouldn't, but if you do, 5.8 points. Even Justin Jefferson is prone to down weeks. Now, yeah, in between that, he had a 35 burger, 26, 24, 13.7, 12.8, 22, 30, 24.8, 15, 27.8, 24.3, 25.3. Justin Jefferson is also damn near about as safe as it gets. But Cooper Kupp, in games that he started and finished last year, did not have a game where he had single-digit scoring. He was in double-digit scoring in every game he started and finished. That is ridiculous. Meanwhile, the Vikings now have a full season of TJ Hawkinson, and they added Jordan Addison in the first round of the 2023 draft. I don't think Jordan Addison is a better player than Adam Thielen is, at least, right now. But I think 2023 Jordan Addison is probably better than an aging 2022, dating back to last year, Adam Thielen, who is now on the downside of his career. So he's not taking targets away from Justin Jefferson, but he's a more enticing target probably than Adam Thielen was last year. There's just more upside. There's more playmaking potential. And you have, again, a full offseason of TJ Hawkinson, who flourished with the Vikings after he got traded there from Detroit midseason. Nevertheless, I do have Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 2. He is the consensus wide receiver 1, and that's fine. I get it. I just listed the numbers that he put up. Most weeks, he was helping you win your matchup. 12 out of 17 games played, Jefferson was giving you double-digit half PPR or full PPR scoring. 9 of those 12 weeks, he was north of 20 half PPR points per game. And a lot of that, it was pretty often, more often than not, it was over 25. You were talking in the 25 to 30 points per game range for Justin Jefferson on a weekly basis. He's excellent. He's spectacular. He's in his prime. He's got a great situation. I believe his fantasy playoff schedule is spectacular this year. I think they play in the Dome this year I think week 16 and week 17, or it's at least week 15 and week 16. So there's not going to be any elements for him to worry about. I don't think he's in Lambeau in week 17 this year. There's no cold weather to be concerned about. So he's about as rock solid as they come outside of Cooper Kupp. So I like Justin Jefferson, again, to have another rock-solid, spectacular top 3 season this year. But I do have him as my wide receiver 2. Not as a knock on him, but you just go look at the floor that forget the ceiling, the floor that Cooper Kupp brings to the table. And if he's healthy for a 17-game season, that's the guy I want slotting into my wide receiver 1 spot if I have to make a choice. These guys are pretty interchangeable. I mean, you're talking about the cream of the crop here, but Jefferson is prone to down weeks in a way that Cooper Kupp, at least over the past couple seasons, has proven he isn't, at least when he's healthy. Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 1. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 2. I'm a little chalky for these next 2 picks, but there's not a ton of intrigue here as far as I'm concerned. Jamar Chase is my wide receiver 3, and he's got wide receiver 1 overall upside as well. Now, Chase missed time last year, just like Kupp did. He missed 5 games due to injury. Still averaged 15 half PPR fantasy points per game, but like Justin Jefferson, he did still have his down weeks. He can be a little hot and cold. Chase had 4 weeks last year where he was south of double-digit half PPR scoring. 8.3 week 2, 9.7 week 3. He just creeped over it in week 4. He got there, 10.1. I mean, that's usable, but you want more from Jamar Chase than 10.1 half PPR points. 8.5 week 5. 9.9 week 16. And then obviously week 17 straight up didn't happen between the Bengals and Bills on Monday Night Football. So we lost that opportunity from Jamar Chase. So I won't hold that one against him, but that's 4 other times that he was under 10 half PPR points on the year, and he had a 5th week in there where he just crept over it. Other weeks, he's spectacular. He's helping you win the week. 23.9 points week 1. 28.7 points week 6. He went nuts against the Saints. 29 points week 7. 13.2 week 13. That's the floor that you're hoping for from a guy like Jamar Chase. 23.5 week 14. 15.5 week 15. If you extended your championship week to week 18 last year, 18.6. The overall wide receiver one upside is there for Ja'Marr Chase. And among these guys in the top three, between Kupp, Jefferson, and Chase, it's fair to say that Chase has the best quarterback of the bunch throwing him the ball. So you feel good about that. Again, I'm just proving that these guys are human. It's not a knock on these guys. It's okay. It's just what Cooper Kupp does on a per week basis is absolutely outrageous. Yes, he's a little bit older, so that's a little bit more of a concern. Justin Jefferson, Ja'Marr Chase are still incredibly young. I think they're like, Chase is what, 23 years old? Jefferson's 24 years old. Don't quote me on that specifically, but I don't think I'm completely off base on that. Yeah, Jefferson's 24. He already turned 24 this year, so he will be 24 for this 2023 season. I think Chase is like a year younger. He's 23. Yeah, I was spot on. Look at me go. Young guys, I think it's fair to say they're already in their prime. Generally speaking, wide receivers apex is in that age 26, age 27 season. You're already getting that from guys like Justin Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase. They're absolute bona fide studs. I just can't ignore the fact that when ranking Cooper Kupp first overall in half PPR scoring last year, he didn't have a game where he finished with single-digit half PPR points. Jefferson and Chase did. The flip side for Ja'Marr Chase, yes, he's got the best quarterback of the bunch, catching passes from Joe Burrow. But on the other side is another damn good wide receiver in T. Higgins, who is going to get his some weeks more than Chase does. Not every week. Chase is the undisputed wide receiver one for the Bengals. Make no mistake. But there is another elite option for the Bengals to go to on the other side of the football. We're splitting hairs here, and that's kind of the game that you play when you're trying to figure out guys in the top 3, the top 5, the top 10. Ultimately, any one of these dudes you're happy with on your fantasy team, but somebody has to be ranked first, and somebody has to be ranked second, and somebody has to be ranked third. The consistency for Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 1, the upside of Justin Jefferson being the, far and away bona fide top option for the Vikings, wide receiver 2. Ja'Marr Chase is the unquestioned wide receiver 1 for the Bengals, but of these three, his teammate that lines up alongside of him is also elite in T. Higgins. So that's what I'll keep Ja'Marr Chase as my wide receiver 3. They're all going to be excellent. We're just coming down to splitting hairs at this point. My wide receiver 4 is Tyreek Hill. 281 total half PPR points last year for an average of 16.6 per game. He was even more consistent last year than Jefferson and Chase were. He only had 1 week where he was under double-digit scoring, and that was week 5. He had 9.5. Tyreek Hill was almost as consistent as Cooper Kupp was. And he played a 17-game season last year. Well, if you want to count week 18, which I don't think we need to, because I don't believe the Dolphins were playing for anything last year for week 18. They weren't playing for the division. They may have, I believe they may have rested those guys. 3.3 half PPR points in week 18. That only applies to people who still play championship weeks the very last week of the season, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. Tyreek Hill was probably the second most consistent player last year on a per week basis other than Cooper Kupp. Oh, I'm sorry. He had a clunker week 3, 4.3 half PPR points. But outside of that, 14, 36.5, 20.9 in week 4, 23.7 in week 6, 10.7 week 7, 25.5. These are half PPR fantasy points in week 8, 23.8 week 9, 12.9 week 10, week 11 bye, 12 half PPR points in week 12, 25.1 week 13, 16.1 week 14, 17.4 week 15, 12.3 week 16, 13.7 week 17. That's about as rock solid as it gets. There are some question marks about his quarterback, right? How healthy is Tua? Can Tua hold up for the duration of an entire season? Do we feel good about the fact that he's trying out a new helmet that hopefully keeps him safe and protected, or as protected as he can be? He suffered some terrible looking concussions last year that truly brought into question the potential longevity of Tua's career. So there is that small bit of concern. It's not Tyreek himself, but it is his quarterback. And of course, like Ja'Marr Chase, Tyreek Hill has an elite teammate on the other side of the football in Jaylen Waddle that the Dolphins can turn to. So, like Ja'Marr Chase, Tyreek Hill is the undisputed wide receiver 1 for the Dolphins. Also, like Ja'Marr Chase, Tyreek Hill has an elite teammate in Jaylen Waddle who can have his weeks over Tyreek, and probably will. Not more often than not, but it can still happen. And factoring in the potential for Tua's health, I'll put Tyreek as my wide receiver 4 and not a little bit higher. But like all of these guys, he is, I think, the last guy on this list with overall wide receiver 1 upside. Number 5 is Stefon Diggs. And then I'll say my piece about Stefon Diggs, and then I can take a break here. I see a couple of questions in the chat, and I'll be sure to answer those. But let me get through my wide receiver 5 thoughts here. I do have Stefon Diggs. Now, his situation is very similar to Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. He is the unquestioned, clear-cut, without a doubt, best offensive weapon that offense has, and whoever is in second isn't close. 266 half PPR points last year. But again, Diggs proved that he can be a little human. He had 5 games where he was under double-digit scoring on a per-week basis. And unfortunately, Diggs, if you had Stefon Diggs last year, he killed you in the fantasy playoffs. Unless your league went to a week 18 championship week. .2 points in week 4. 5.2 half PPR points in week 14, 8.2 in week 15, 3.6 in week 16. Again, that week 17 game got canceled on Monday Night Football, so you don't really hold that against him. 3.6. He was probably well on his way to a big game that week, let's be honest. But it didn't happen. The game literally didn't happen, so you don't really hold that against him. But he finished strong with 19.9 in week 18 if your championship went that far. Otherwise, he was about as incredible as Stefon Diggs usually is. 22 half PPR points week 1. He went nuclear week 2, 38.8 points. Was that the best single game performance of a wide receiver this year? Stefon Diggs week 2? It might have been. In just default half PPR scoring, 38.8 points. I remember that game. It was against Tennessee. He caught 3 touchdowns in addition to about 1 million yards, give or take. Week 3, 10.9. Right. I already said 8.2 week 4, 20.2 half PPR points week 5, 25.8 week 6. The dude was a monster. Week 7 bye week, 19.8 week 8, 11.8 week 9, 18.8 week 10, 12.8 week 11, 17.7 week 12, 18.7 week 13, and then he had that bad string to end the season. We also have to remember Josh Allen injured his elbow somewhere in that area, and while he didn't miss any time, his play was hampered by the elbow injury. So that affected Diggs' output as well at the end of the season. Doesn't do fantasy managers any good, but he's that type of dude where you had to roll the dice every single week with a guy like him regardless, whether it was an injured Josh Allen or if they got a Case Keenum in there, or if they had needed to. They didn't, but even if he had to have played, you're firing up Stefon Diggs and you're not thinking twice about it. So rock-solid consistency with some absolute slate-busting weeks, there's no doubt. I did say that Tyreek Hill might be the last of the wide receivers to have wide receiver 1 overall upside. Diggs is in that conversation as well. The Bills spent a first-round pick on tight end Dalton Kincaid, so they add a pass catcher, not a wide receiver. They did that in free agency, right? They added Deontay Harty. They still have Gabe Davis. Khalil Shakir is in year 2. And then, of course, they still have Dawson Knox, who got off to a really slow start last year. He was dealing with some personal stuff at the beginning of the season. Started catching touchdowns in the second half of the season. I actually like Dawson Knox quite a bit at his ADP. I think it's around like 170 or so, but different conversation. Point being, even with Dalton Kincaid, the first-round tight end, being added to the offense, there's no question Diggs is the 1A, the 1B, the 1C option in the passing game for this offense that loves to throw the ball a lot with Josh Allen. I have Diggs as my wide receiver 5. I mean, we're again, you're kind of splitting hairs with these top 5 options. You're happy to have any single one of them. But I have Diggs as my wide receiver 5. You could certainly make an argument that he should be higher because he gets to catch passes from Josh Allen. Meanwhile, somebody like Tyreek Hill, who is excellent as an individual player, but there's maybe a flag or two around Tua in a way that there isn't for Josh Allen. Tua had a spectacular year last year, proved to be an incredibly accurate thrower of the football, an incredibly accurate deep ball passer. But I don't think anybody would sit here and argue that Tua can challenge Josh Allen as far as who is the straight up better quarterback. Which is why, for me, Tyreek gets the slight nod. As an individual playmaker. So those are my top 5. Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Stefon Diggs. I'll take a break. I see a couple of questions here in the chat, so we will talk those, and then I will get to wide receivers 6 through 12. What's going on, Theo? Is Keenan Allen worth trading for? I mean, if we're talking around that 206 pick range or something of similar value, I do think I would rather spend that on Jamal Williams, given the development with Kendre Miller earlier today. In addition to what we're expecting to be a 4 to 6 game suspension from Alvin Kamara, I think Jamal Williams has RB1 upside for the first month of the season, or at least that's what it looks like for right now. If it's a similar ask for Keenan Allen, you might need to spend a little bit more than that for Keenan Allen. Yeah, I mean, it's, do you buy into, he's potentially going to be healthy for a 17-game season this year because he wasn't last year. The Chargers offense should be better. You have to believe in the narratives that the Chargers are going to be better this year than they were last year. Like, do you believe those narratives? They hired Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. That should help their offense. Justin Herbert's not going to be coming into the season injured or not having suffered an injury, at least yet. Remember, he broke his ribs like week 2, and that hampered him for a good portion of the season. Keenan Allen missed a lot of time last year. Mike Williams missed, I think, at least a month worth of time last year. This Chargers offense was never healthy. And then I believe Rashawn Slater, their left tackle, I think missed the entire season last year or pretty close to it. So If he's back healthy, the offense should be better. I think Slater had a spectacular rookie season, protecting Justin Herbert's blind side. So if all of these things come together, the Chargers should be a really good offense this year. So if you're competing, depends on what the asking price is. Sure, you could buy Keenan Allen. But I wouldn't go nuts here because he is, I think, 31 at this point. They drafted Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston's more of a Mike Williams, I won't say replacement, but they feel like they are of similar molds. So that's a positive development for Keenan Allen, not a negative one. I think it's fine to try to roll the dice on him, especially while his value is a little bit lower than it would be, now that I'm kind of like talking myself into it. It's just, advanced age, has a bit more of an injury history than your average wide receiver. So there's some risk built in. But he's catching passes from Justin Herbert. That's good. They brought in Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. That should be good. Dallas had top offenses in the NFL with Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. So these should all be positive developments for the Chargers offense as a whole, which means it's a positive development for Keenan Allen. Just depends on what the asking price is. CXK, what's going on, man? Good to see you. A wide receiver or tight end to pair with Christian Watson and DK Metcalf. There's tiers to this, right? In full PPR, hell, the guy right above that Theo just asked about, Keenan Allen is theoretically a PPR monster that should be a bit of a reduced cost right now. That's one guy. If you're looking for a discount, could be a guy like Keenan Allen. One of the guys that I am targeting heavily, at least in best ball, might be a little different for Dynasty, but in best ball, his value is way down because there's concern about Kyler Murray, but I would be in on Marquise Brown if I were you guys. I would be in on Hollywood Brown. Oh, you want to tier up to? Okay. I'm sorry, I read it wrong. So does that mean you're trading those two guys or you're offering those two guys and you're looking to see what you can get? Is that what you mean? Okay, yeah, you want to do a 2-for-1. You're offering up Watson, whose stock is very high right now. Actually, both of these guys, Watson and DK, their stock is very high right now. If you're trading those two dudes, if it's a tight end, you're probably not going to get Kelsey, but I would be shooting for Mark Andrews. If it's a wide receiver, you're talking about a guy, maybe this isn't the best correlation, but just thinking about their redraft ADPs right now on Underdog, DK Metcalf's ADP is around 28. Christian Watson's ADP is like 38, 39. You're talking about premium options at the wide receiver position. I'm asking for like Jaylen Waddle or Chris Olave. Devontae Smith, like T. Higgins, somebody in that range. You should be asking for somebody. I would say go for like somebody like Jaylen Waddle. If you're worried about Tua long term, then hell, ask for Olave. You can sell it like, well, Michael Thomas is coming back. It's a new quarterback with Derek Carr, this, that, and the other thing. Like you could to try to kick the tires on that. Like you're talking about two really good players, one of which is very young, both of whom their stock is up right now. The vibes are good based on the end of last year with DK Metcalf and Christian Watson. Go for the jugular. Ask for Chris Olave. Ask for Jaylen Waddle. Hell, if you want to take it a step further, ask for Amon-Ra St. Brown. You should be asking for a guy that projects as a top 10 or 12 wide receiver. If you're offering those two dudes. And if it's a tight end, I don't know if you're going to get anything a little extra out of a deal, but ask for Mark Andrews. These are good names that you're throwing out there. These aren't scrubs. Christian Watson projects to lead the Packers in targets. He should anyway. I don't know if he'll lead them in catches, but he should lead them in targets. And DK Metcalf, I mean, y'all already know. You know who DK Metcalf is. You know what you're getting out of DK Metcalf. He's probably the most, physical specimen at the wide receiver position outside of Deebo Samuel. There's another name you could try to ask for, but you could also ask for even more than that. Like Christian Watson and DK Metcalf, I'll take Deebo Samuel on a first-round pick for those two guys. If you need a tight end, I'm asking for Mark Andrews because his value's a little down right now. Yeah, I mean, shoot for the moon, man. Those are really good names. Don't settle. And if the people in your league who have those guys aren't willing to part with the big-time names, then keep your guys. You know? Yeah, go for it. Crumbly heads, I mean, Pittman and the 112. Keenan Allen and a 26 first. Okay, that's fine. I mean, the 112 this year is not the most enticing pick this year, the way people thought it might be a couple of years ago or even last year. That's fine. You're getting a wide receiver in a better offense. He's older, for sure. But you still got a first-round pick in the deal. But the Chargers should be a lot better this year. Remember, Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator there now. Dallas regularly had top 10 offenses with Kellen Moore calling the shots, calling the plays. So, yeah. In theory, as long as he's able to stay healthy, Keenan Allen should be a PPR monster this year. So, yeah, that's fine. I mean, the value in Pittman right now is that he's younger, and he just got his potential quarterback of the future in Anthony Richardson. But the passing volume in Indianapolis right now is kind of in question. Pittman's the top dog, so he should be fine regardless, but it's a rookie quarterback who's probably taking his lumps and, could be in for some rough weeks here and there because he's a rookie on a rebuilding team versus a veteran wide receiver catching passes from Justin Herbert, who everyone is down on last year because he broke his ribs in week 2 and didn't have his starting offense as a whole in any capacity last year. Maybe he did in week 1. Or actually, I think that's when Keenan Allen went down, right? Wasn't it week 1? He went down early. Now Allen is healthy. Mike Williams is healthy. Rashawn Slater, their left tackle, is back healthy. Should be a good offense for the Chargers this year. So yeah, no, I think that's a good benchmark to kind of lean on when talking about how you acquire Keenan Allen and you still get future draft capital in the form of a first-round pick. You got to wait a couple of years, but whatever. Keenan Allen will hold down the fort for you for those couple of years until it comes time to replace him. So yeah, I think that's solid. What's going on, Hunter? Good to see you, man. I think Quentin Johnson helps Keenan Allen. I don't know that he hurts Mike Williams, but those two feel like they're kind of similar play style, right? They're bigger wide receivers. I think Quentin Johnson is a little bit more of obviously it's not a replica, but he profiles a little bit more than Mike Williams, at least from a physicality perspective. So I would say that helps Keenan Allen. I mean, if I'm the Chargers, I put Mike Williams on one side, I put Quentin Johnson on the other side, and I put Keenan Allen in the slot. I'll move Austin Eckler all around the formation, and I'll tell you, hey, I have Justin Herbert. Good luck figuring this out. Good luck figuring out how to stop this. Should be a good offense in general. Like, I'm buying the Chargers. Keenan Allen's kind of tough to get because, at least for redraft, I think his ADP is settled into the 3rd round. I don't love paying that price when I can get Deebo Samuel in the 3rd round, but Mike Williams' ADP is down. Quentin Johnson is not terribly difficult to get. His ADP is around 75, 80 range, somewhere in there. And Justin Herbert, as far as the higher end options at quarterback go, is relatively affordable. His ADP is in the 55 to 60 range in one quarterback leagues. So I guess maybe Johnson takes a couple targets away from Mike Williams, but I don't think he hurts Keenan Allen. I think he helps Keenan Allen. If anything, maybe he hurts Mike Williams. They profile similarly. Yeah. No, it should be a good offense. Should be a good offense. Yeah, 6K. Try for Andrews then. If you need tight end help, then try for Mark Andrews. His value is down a little bit now. Somebody might see those wide receiver names and decide that they want to pull the trigger. And in tight end premium, I mean, Andrews should have 6-7 years left of potential high-end production. Especially in a Baltimore offense that hired, oh my God, the guy from Georgia. They got rid of Greg Roman. Todd Monken, that was it. They hired Tom Monken. This should be a Ravens offense that throws the ball more than they have in any year since Lamar was inserted as the starter. So who's the main beneficiary of that? The best pass catcher, Mark Andrews. And his value's down right now. So yeah, go for it. Those wide receivers, in theory, should at least be in the ballpark of being able to get that deal done. I would think. All right. Last question, and then I'm going to continue on with my rankings. My wide receivers 6 through 12, but of course I'll continue to check the chat here and there for questions. Am I sold on Pollard? You bet I am. Yeah, I'm sold on Pollard. Where did I rank him in my running back rankings? Did I have him as my RB7? I did. When I did my top 12 rankings, I had Pollard as my RB7, Hunter. I don't know if he can handle a full workload, but I don't know that he needs to. He's the type of dude that can come through on big time, like on just by being efficient. Zeke is out of the picture. Yeah, I would say the Cowboys are still a threat to potentially add to the backfield, whether it's Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt. If they can get one of these guys for cheap, of course, they have to agree to not spending that much, or, not being paid that much money as veteran running backs. That it's possible that happens. Dog is saying hello over my shoulder. But I'm very in on Pollard this year. I think he has easy RB1 upside, especially when you consider the potential that Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs straight up don't play this year. There's a non-zero chance that happens. With Ezekiel Elliott out of the picture, Mike McCarthy has gone on record multiple times saying he wants to run the ball more this year. I'm not going to play with the potential concern that Tony Pollard can't handle a bell cow workload. I don't want to play that game. I want to swing for the fences and I want to shoot for the upside. Pollard has all of it this year. These aren't the Cowboys' offensive lines of old. In recent years, they've been very good. They're not as good as they have been. But even if they do add Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt or like a Darrell Henderson, today, right now, in the year 2023, of those names I mentioned, Tony Pollard is far and away the most talented option the Cowboys will have to turn to no matter what for the 2023 season. Here's the other thing about Tony Pollard. In case you missed my opening comments about Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley about the franchise tag. Tony Pollard also got slapped with the franchise tag this year, similar to Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. The difference between those two and Tony Pollard is Tony Pollard signed it. Tony Pollard agreed on the franchise tag. To me, this means, especially when you consider what the Cowboys just had to deal with the Zeke contract that they just had to unload, this spells to me that the Cowboys are going to ride Tony Pollard into the ground this year and then let him walk. It's almost cruel that, not almost, I think it's kind of fucked up how the NFL treats these running backs, right? They grind them into the ground and then they just send them out to pasture and draft a new one, right? That's the nature of the beast, though. They don't have anybody else anywhere close to Pollard's talent level that they can turn to in the backfield. And if they want to run the ball as much as they claim they want to run the ball, who else are they going to lean on? No disrespect to Deuce Vaughn, but he's like 5'5". Malik Davis is an intriguing guy in that backfield and certainly a guy to keep an eye on. Maybe not as your last pick in your redraft leagues, but certainly when you're scouring the waiver wire at some point this offseason, Malik Davis might, or during the season, excuse me, not the offseason, Malik Davis might be a guy that you want to pluck up. But the clear-cut, far and away best guy that the Cowboys have that they can turn to is Tony Pollard. And given the fact that he's going to be playing this year on the franchise tag, every indication tells me they're going to give him as much work as he can possibly handle, and then let some other team sign him in 2024. I am very sold on Pollard this year. You can have him at an ADP of around 20, back half of the second round. You're getting a guy who profiles as an RB1, 20 to 22, 23 picks into your draft. Knowing that he's going to show up because he signed his franchise tag. There's no incentive for him to hold out for more money because he can get fined. Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, they can't get fined because they haven't signed anything. Tony Pollard can get fined if he were to hold out. There's no threat of him holding out. I'm just comparing apples to apples here a little bit from the perspective of who got slapped with the franchise tag this year. Tony Pollard doesn't benefit from that because he already signed the tag. He's going to show up and he's going to play with a clear path to a significant workload. I'm all in on Tony Pollard this year. And I think y'all should be too. You can get a guy who profiles as an RB1, 20 to 22 or 23 picks into your draft. All right. Those are my thoughts on some of the questions. Appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out today. Appreciate the engagement. Thank you as always. Let's keep it moving to finish off the wide receiver rankings, or at least keep it moving on them. I'm happy to keep taking questions in the chat as they come up. Wide receivers 1 through 5. Again, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, and Stefon Diggs. My wide receiver 6. These guys are pretty interchangeable too. We're kind of in this like back half of the wide receiver 1 rankings. My wide receiver 6 is A.J. Brown. He's on what looks to be the most complete offense at least in the NFC in Philly. Jalen Hurts had almost an MVP season last year. The thing here with Philly that kind of, I feel like maybe it gets talked about. I haven't seen it that much, but the passing volume is actually in the bottom half of the league for the Eagles. It's not the top half. They came through on incredible efficiency last year. Jalen Hurts had a spectacular season from an efficiency perspective last year. Now, I have no reason to believe he can't do that again. But we are asking for A.J. Brown to come through on some elite efficiency. But that's all he's done in his career, dating back to his time with Tennessee, who is one of the lowest volume passing offenses in the NFL 5 or 6 years running now. A.J. Brown finished as the wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game last year. And he was pretty damn rock solid and pretty damn consistent. Only 3 games under double-digit half PPR scoring on a per-week basis. Excuse me, 4 games. Sorry. 20.5 half PPR points week 1. 9.4 week 2. So he just missed 10 half PPR points week 2. 17 half PPR points week 3. 12 week 4. 4.7 week 5. So not very good. 15.2 week 6. He had his bye week 7. He went nuclear. I think that was against the Steelers. 36.6 half PPR points in week 8. He probably single-handedly won you the week that week. 13.9 in week 9. 1.2 in week 10. Not very good. Not very good at all. 6.5 week 11. Again, you expect more from A.J. Brown. 10.6 week 12. Let's be fair. He did crack double-digit scoring, but you are hoping for a little bit more from A.J. Brown than 10.6 half PPR points. But he carried you for the rest of the way. 27.9 half PPR points week 13. 15 points week 14. 22.6 week 15. 13.3 week 16. 17.7 week 17. And for those who still, for whatever reason, play your fantasy championships in week 18, he had 11.5 half PPR points. So some clunkers in there for sure, but guess what? He's human. Ho-hum. It's not a knock on A.J. Brown. That's rock-solid consistency and efficiency, however, which way you want to splice it. I have him as my wide receiver 6. Again, we're splitting hairs with these dudes. All of these guys are guys where you're more than happy to have on your fantasy team. Just depends on where you end up in the draft. Jalen Hurts had an absolutely incredible ascension last year. Probably would have won the MVP had he not gotten hurt late in the season. Or the argument would have been much stronger anyway, at least against Patrick Mahomes if he had stayed healthy. But I think he might have been the favorite prior to that injury. A.J. Brown is going to be asked to come through again on incredible efficiency because I do believe Philly ranks in the bottom half. Not like bottom, but I do think they're outside the top 15 as far as pass attempts per game. So he'll have to come through on great efficiency, but he's proven he can do that multiple seasons in his career. And they've got a pretty damn good wide receiver on the other side in Davante Smith, who, while he is the wide receiver 2 in that offense, he can be the wide receiver 1 some weeks. And he will be. I got A.J. Brown as my wide receiver 6. I have CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver 7, sticking in the NFC East. CeeDee was the wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game last year. Had a spectacular season. 3.9 half PPR fantasy points week 1. That's a clunker. 11.6 week 2. Better. You hope for more from a guy like CeeDee Lamb. And then he started to pick it up a little bit. 18.7 half PPR points, both in weeks 3 and 4 each. 7.8 half PPR points week 5, 10.2 week 6, 8.6 week 7, So a 3-game stretch of meh. 16.3 week 8, good. Had his bye week 9. Had his high water mark week 10 coming out of the bye week, 32.5 half PPR points. Then he was back down to 7 in week 11, 14.7 week 12, 17.9 week 13, just 5.8 week 14. And then in the fantasy playoffs, he had you. CD took care of you. 16.2 week 15, 29 half PPR fantasy points week 16. Probably catapulted more than a few people into their championship match with that performance. 15.5 week 17, 13.7 week 18. The floor was there for CD in 2022. And remember, some of those performances came with Cooper Rush. Dak Prescott missed a little bit of time in the beginning of the season. So ideally, he gets a full season of Dak in 2023. The other thing here with the Cowboys in 2022 was they had to cut Amari Cooper, again, because of the Ezekiel Elliott contract. It's just like, I hate to say it, but it's just like there's more and more proof in the pudding with these, with the trickle-down effect, right? The end result of what has to happen when you pay a running back big bucks. It can hamstring you in other areas. The Cowboys had to cut Amari Cooper for nothing. And Michael Gallup was still recovering from a torn ACL he suffered in 2021. They didn't have anything reliable to work with on the other side of the field opposite CeeDee Lamb. So CeeDee Lamb was giving you pretty strong outputs, was delivering the goods, facing all of the attention from opposing defensive coordinators. That's not going to be the case in 2023. Well, obviously he'll still be focal point 1, 2, and 3 for opposing defenses, but there's a viable option now on the other side of the field for the Cowboys in the passing offense. They traded for Brandon Cooks this year. Much stronger number 2 option than a recovering Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup proved he can be an upper echelon wide receiver in the NFL before the injury. But then he tore his ACL. Last year was kind of like a get back into the swing of things type of year for Michael Gallup. He wasn't quite ready to be a bona fide second option in the receiving game, not because of the talent, but because he's coming back from injury. Now, on top of that, you probably have a healthy Michael Gallup coming into 2023 as your wide receiver 3, and you have Brandon Cooks on the other side taking the top off as your wide receiver 2. Brandon Cooks is an upper echelon deep threat in the NFL. I think he's 29 years old, but he's been in the NFL for 47 years. Math. This should help CeeDee Lamb. This is an instance where it's okay, I think this helps CeeDee Lamb relative to the circumstances that he had last year. Again, Mike McCarthy has stressed he wants to run the ball more this year. For better or worse. He wants to run the ball more this year. His thought process here is he's preserving his defense. He's keeping them off the field if they're able to sustain long drives, the Cowboys, and keep their offense on the field. But even if that's the case, that's not going to stop CeeDee Lamb from having wide receiver 1 upside. Gone is Kellen Moore. And Dallas was a little farther down the list than they usually are in pass attempts per game this past year. They were around 33 pass attempts per game last year. That was 19th in the NFL. But again, Cooper Rush played, 4 or 5, 6 games for them last year? So that's going to skew the numbers a little bit. You don't have your starting quarterback for, a third of the season. That's going to skew the numbers a little bit. Even if they're only throwing the ball 35 times a game, that still comfortably gives CeeDee Lamb a 10 target average per week. At least. He gives you rock solid consistency. If Dak is able to stay healthy for a 17-game season, that boosts his floor. I have him as my wide receiver 7 here. Combination of past, performance from last season coupled with what we believe to be is a potential shift in mindset and offensive philosophy and offensive approach for the Dallas Cowboys this year. They may want to run the ball a little bit more, so that could take away, attempts here and there and over the course of the season. That, of course, adds up. Nevertheless, CeeDee Lamb continues to have wide receiver 1 upside. Maybe not wide receiver 1 overall upside, but definitely top 5 wide receiver upside. I got him as my wide receiver 7 on the season. My wide receiver 8. This is where personal preference is really going to start to come into play. My wide receiver 8 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra has an outstanding chance to get off to the strongest start to the season of any of these guys out of pure necessity. Gone is TJ Hawkinson, right? Obviously, that was dating back to midseason, but midseason last year. TJ Hawkinson is gone, traded to Minnesota. In comes Sam Laporta. I think they spent like the 34th pick overall on him, but it's a rookie tight end. You expect a bit of a learning curve, at least to start. And then, of course, Jameson Williams is suspended for the first 6 games of the season. The ancillary options for for the Detroit Lions wide receivers after Amon-Ra are Josh Reynolds and Marvin Jones. DJ Chark walked in free agency. He went to Carolina. And they cut Quintez Cephas because he was gambling as well, in addition to Jameson Williams. And gone is DeAndre Swift as well, pass-catching running back replaced by Jahmyr Gibbs, the 12th overall pick in the NFL draft. They also bring in David Montgomery. So the backfield has certainly got a couple viable pass catchers out of the backfield, especially Gibbs. We expect a big pass-catching profile from Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's going to be probably needed early on this season. Amon-Ra should line up in the slot pretty frequently and should be the PPR monster of at least the first portion of the season. There's another name for you, CXK, if you're still in here. If you can't get Andrews for those guys, if you can't get Olave for those guys, I would also be looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown. He should be an absolute PPR monster, at least for the first third of the season. $16.4 half PPR points week 1. Went nuts week 2, 34.9. 10.3 week 3. He didn't play week 4. 3.8 week 5, so dud week in there. He had a week 6 bye. Week 7 was a bad clunker, only 0.9, so that's like what, 1 catch for 4 yards? Not good. 10.4 points week 8. 7.5 points week 9. 17.1 week 10, 11.5 week 11, 23.4 week 12, 29.1 week 13, 10.4 week 14. I'm listing off the weeks following the TJ Hawkinson trade. 11.7 week 15, 11.1 week 16, Only 8.2 week 17 and 7.9 week 18. So those weren't very good finishes. I do, of course, week 18 was in Lambeau, Sunday Night Football. That was Aaron Rodgers' swan song in Green Bay. You're talking about a January game at night in the cold in Lambeau. So 7.9 half PPR points in a week where we shouldn't be playing fantasy championships in that week anyway. 7.9 half PPR points. So a couple stinkers in there, right? Week 5, less than 4 half PPR points, not good. Week 7, 1 catch for 4 yards is not going to get it done. But in every game after Hockenson got traded, he was north of double-digit half PPR fantasy points ever in each week up until week 17. On top of 2 excellent games to start the season, weeks 1 and weeks 2, when he combined for 50 half PPR points between the two of them. So there was some inconsistency in the middle of the season for him. You can't, I can't put him any higher than this, but expectations should be huge for him. He's going to be needed for the first 6 weeks of the season until Jameson Williams comes back. And even when Jameson Williams comes back, we still can't sit here and definitively say that we know what Jameson Williams is. So, I said at the top of the show when I'm talking about running backs, when specifically talking about Kendre Miller and Isiah Pacheco, it's incredibly dicey. It's a bit of a red flag to draft dudes who are injured from the jump. On the flip side, it's a great idea to invest in dudes who have a great chance, as good as any, to get off to a strong start. That's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'll take him as my wide receiver 8 for the 2023 season. My wide receiver 9. This one's difficult. And based on ADP, I'm not going out on a limb here. But there is certainly some risk baked into this. My wide receiver 9 is Garrett Wilson, which is high. Right? Wilson was a wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game last year. He was a rookie. You expect inconsistencies from a rookie. But consider the circumstances last year. Garrett Wilson was catching passes from Zach Wilson, who was awful, and that's putting it nicely last year, was absolutely terrible. He caught passes from Joe Flacco to start the season, and Mike White mixed in there as well. Suffice to say, it was a hodgepodge situation of quarterbacks for the New York Jets last year. Garrett Wilson still put up 83 catches for 1,100 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. Consider those factors. That is a pretty impressive line as a rookie on a bad team, or at least on a bad offense. It's not a bad team as a whole. The Jets' defense is quite good, but that offense was putrid specifically because of the quarterback play. Now we replace all that with, he's older. He's a lot older. He's aging. He's closer to the end, much closer to the end than he is to the beginning. But we're talking about a future Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers. So if Garrett Wilson can catch 83 balls for 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns from the combination of Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, and Mike White, I have to think he's a real threat to top all of those marks, especially the touchdowns with Aaron Rodgers. And, it was very hot and cold for Garrett Wilson last year, right? He only had 3 true big-time blow-up performances. Week 2, 26 half PPR points. Weeks 12 and 13, 24 half PPR points, 20 half PPR points. Every other game last year, he was under 15 half PPR points. So he was difficult to trust. He was difficult to believe in getting into your lineup. He was under 10 half PPR points 8 times last year, Garrett Wilson was. That is a high number. That is a number that screams inconsistency, for sure. But he finished still as the wide receiver 19 on the season. He played a full season, so obviously that certainly helps. So wide receiver 2 on the season. He was a wide receiver 3 in fantasy points per game. So again, this is a bit of a leap of faith, having Garrett Wilson this high. But the situation that he finds himself in this year compared to last year is significantly different for the better. Will there be some down weeks? Yeah, probably. Aaron Rodgers can be, he's proven in the past he can be kind of slow to trust new receivers, new guys he's working with. That's proven to be the case when dating back pretty much his entire tenure in Green Bay. Plus, they brought in some of his boys from the Packers, right? They signed Allen Lazard. They brought in Randall Cobb. They also signed Mecole Hardman in free agency from the Chiefs. But between Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Mecole Hardman, and Randall Cobb, there's no question here who the head and shoulders most talented player is of those names. It's Garrett Wilson. His quarterback situation is better. His overall situation is better. There should be, in theory, some stability with the quarterback position now. He doesn't have to rotate. They're not playing musical chairs at quarterback this year. Wilson will remain firmly on the bench. Mike White signed with the Dolphins, so he's not even in the picture anymore. And Joe Flacco is a free agent. So the pieces are in place for Garrett Wilson to put it all together. And drafters seem to feel the same way. He's got an ADP overall of 13.1. So he's a borderline first-round pick in 12-team leagues. And in leagues where people are going to be more aggressive grabbing wide receivers, that probably means he sneaks in as a first-round pick overall. So it's a bit of a leap of faith, but when you factor in all of the positives now surrounding the Jets offense, the arrow is pointing straight up for Garrett Wilson. He should be able to build on what he did last year in all regard, catches, yards, and touchdowns. All theoretically could go up, especially the scores, on an Aaron Rodgers-led offense that should be in scoring position significantly more than the Jets were last year with the trio of Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, and Mike White. Garrett Wilson is my wide receiver 9 for 2023. It feels a little disrespectful, But my wide receiver 10 is kind of the opposite as my wide receiver 9. Garrett Wilson this is kind of like a projection based on positive things. My wide receiver 10 is the most proven bona fide stud who has the most working against him, and that's Davante Adams, who all he has done is put up top 3 wide receiver seasons for like 7 or 8 years running, if not longer. Had an excellent season last year, catching passes from Derek Carr. He was the wide receiver 3 in fantasy points per game. 25.1 week 1, 8.2 half PPR points week 2. So, meh. 11.7 week 3, 15 week 4, 25.9 week 5. He had an early bye week 6. 13.5 week 7. He had a 0.7 clunker week 8. So that's 1 catch for 2 yards in half PPR. But then he went on a nice run over a 5-game stretch. 31.6 in week 9, 23.1 week 10, 29.6 week 11. His low was 10.9 week 12, so still cleared double digits. And then a 33.7 half PPR point performance week 13. He hurt you for the next 3 weeks. 8.6 week 14, 4.8 week 15, 2.5 week 16. That was around the time where Derek Carr got benched in favor of Jarrett Stidham. Where he got you was if you made it to championship week with Davante Adams. Week 17, he gave you a 30-burger, 30.8 half PPR points in championship week. And then to round it out, 9.8 week 18. Hopefully that week doesn't matter for fantasy players, but we all know some people still have their championship weeks then, even though they shouldn't. So another stellar season for Davante Adams. I think he was the wide receiver 2 on the season, the wide receiver 3 in fantasy points per game. He's a bona fide stud. On the surface, it looks like you're getting an insane value being able to draft him with an ADP of around 14, excuse me. The problem is this Raiders team might not be very good. Specifically, I don't know if we know who the quarterback is going to be. Jimmy Garoppolo, the last time I heard about him, is his status to make the roster is not even a guarantee based on an offseason injury that they failed to see in the physical before they signed him. They might release him, the Raiders. They might release Jimmy Garoppolo without any type of financial penalty. He's going to have to pass a physical to prove that his foot is healthy. Same injury that cost him the remainder of the season last year when he got hurt with the 49ers. We don't yet know if that's going to come to pass. So, for Davante Adams, we're potentially, at least today, looking at a situation where he's catching passes from Aiden O'Connell, rookie quarterback the Raiders drafted this year. There's no way you can spin that to where you feel good about. Or Brian Hoyer. Brian Hoyer is also on the Raiders roster. If Garoppolo can't make the team because he's unable to pass a physical, because he's not fully healthy from the surgery he had on his foot from his injury he suffered last year, then we're looking at a situation where Davante Adams is catching passes from Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell. That is about as gross as it gets. Davante Adams is excellent. I have to imagine he still has top 5 potential for at least one more season. I was getting a little older. Is he 31 now, Davante Adams? He's getting a little older. No, he's only 30. He'll be 31 later this year in December. Adams isn't the problem here. It's the Raiders' offense around him and the uncertainty that surrounds it that is the concern. And again, if Josh Jacobs sits out, that's one less playmaker that opposing defenses have to worry about for the Raiders offense. It feels like a very icky situation. Adams himself has proven to be pretty bulletproof, even when the circumstances looked like they were against him. He's been able to deliver even when he wasn't catching passes from Aaron Rodgers when he was still in Green Bay. Not that that happened very often, but there were games here and there. I think he had a couple nice games with like Brett Hundley as his quarterback. And then, of course, he had a blow-up game championship week last year catching passes from Jarrett Stidham. So, obviously, all the backup quarterback has to do, whoever it is just go out there and make Davante Adams the first read and throw it to him no matter what. He's, I'm making this sound like it's easy, but if at bare minimum that happens, then Adams will be fine. His numbers will be there at the end of the day. But he is in the most unfortunate situation of his career thus far. We don't even know if he's going to have what was supposed to be his starting quarterback this year in Jimmy Garoppolo. If he's catching passes from Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell, there's no way we can rank Davante Adams as anything higher than a low-end wide receiver 1, and most of that is out of respect for what he has done for his career thus far. So, I have him as my wide receiver 10 out of respect to Davante Adams because he has earned that. I just don't know that the circumstances that he faces this season are anything to feel good about. He could climb over Garrett Wilson and probably even Amon-Ra St. Brown if we find out that Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy after all and able to play, able to get on the practice field for training camp and will be the week 1 starter for the Raiders. If that's the case, congratulations if you were drafting Davante Adams in the 2nd round. That should pay dividends. But if it turns out that Jimmy Garoppolo can't play, he's not healthy, he's going to get released outright from the Raiders because he's not healthy enough to play. I don't want Davante Adams because I don't want a wide receiver whose situation is catching passes from Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell. There's way too much risk there for even the best or one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And I think Adams still is in that conversation for at least another season. But it's not going to matter if those backup quarterbacks are what he's working with for the entire season. To bring it home, to round out my wide receiver 1s, my wide receivers 11 and 12. My wide receiver 11 is Chris Olave. Another second-year receiver cracks the top 12. Where Garrett Wilson struggled on a weekly basis last year, Olave was a little bit better. He was the wide receiver 25 on the season, so he just missed being a wide receiver 2. But that's for the entire season. And he was the wide receiver 24 in fantasy points per game. So he did crack the top 24. He did finish as a wide receiver 2 in points per game. And we expect him to take a step forward going from year 1 to year 2, especially when his quarterback situation, like Garrett Wilson's, also upgraded. Derek Carr is an improvement over the combination of Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. And whether or not Michael Thomas is healthy or able to make it through a full season or even half a season at this point in his career, I think it's fair to say Olave should have leapfrogged him on the depth chart. Olave was definitely not usable every single week, but like Garrett Wilson, he flashed a ton of potential. 7.6 half PPR points in week 1, nah. 8.5 in week 2, nah. Then he had a 3-game stretch, 19.2 week 3, 14.7 week 4, 13.4 week 5. It's very good. Week 6, he didn't play. I believe week 5 was when he got hurt. He suffered a concussion. So his numbers probably would have even been better than 13.4 in week 5 if he didn't suffer the concussion. I believe he suffered it while catching a touchdown. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. He caught the touchdown, but on the play suffered a concussion, was out for the remainder of the game, and missed week 6 as a result. But then he came back and he was pretty good. 14.1 half PPR points week 7, 7.7 week 8. Again, this is a rookie operating as his team's top receiver. 10.1 week 9, 5.5 week 10, not good. But then bounced back in week 11, 18.7 half PPR points, 8.7 and 8.5 points respectively in weeks 12 and 13. Had a late bye, week 14 bye week. And then he ended the season kind of quietly. 6.8 half PPR points week 15. He did not play week 16, fantasy semifinals. Quiet championship week, 6.2 half PPR points week 17. Finished the season pretty nicely with 12.5 half PPR points week 18. 72 total catches, 1,042 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. Again, all of these marks are things that he should be able to improve on with better quarterback play in 2023, which he should receive. Derek Carr is a better quarterback than Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton, or the combination of Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. This offense should be a little bit better as a result. And with Alvin Kamara, again, likely serving at least a 4 to 6 game suspension or thereabouts, a 4 to 6 game suspension, they're going to be leaning on other guys in that offense to pick up the slack. Chris Olave, who profiles and projects to be the Saints' number 1 wide receiver, figures to be first and foremost as that guy to help fill in while Kamara is on the sidelines. So, improved quarterback play should pay dividends for Chris Olave. I do like him slightly over guys like, Jaylen Waddle, Devontae Smith, T. Higgins. He cracks my low-end wide receiver ones. If Michael Thomas is back healthy, that will help him. Defenses can't necessarily completely focus on Chris Olave. They will have to give some type of attention to Michael Thomas, especially if he is fully over the injuries that have hampered him for the past couple of seasons. Nevertheless, I think at this stage of their respective careers, I think Olave is the more talented player for the Saints. I think he's the more talented wide receiver for the Saints. Obviously, Michael Thomas is the most decorated, but I don't know that at this point in his career, today, the 2023 version of Michael Thomas is better than the 2023 version of Chris Olave. I'll say no. Give me Chris Olave as my wide receiver 11 on the season. And as a result of that ranking, I have a lot of Chris Olave in best ball because he's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 12 with an ADP of around 19. I would be drafting him 4 or 5 spots higher than that, and I do like him over Jaylen Waddle. So I do have a very fair amount of Chris Olave on my best ball teams this year. To finish this off, and appreciate you guys again one more time coming in and hanging out today. It's been a fun show doing these rankings and, of course, talking shop on the running backs. I'll answer any questions at the before I close up shop. Let me get through this here, and then we'll move to the chat. To finish it off, my wide receiver 12, my final wide receiver 1 ranking for the 2023 season is Jaylen Waddle. So this is my first, I guess, quote unquote. He's his team's wide receiver 2, but he produces like a wide receiver 1. Waddle was the wide receiver 7 on the year, but he was the wide receiver 13 in fantasy points per game. So the reason he finishes the wide receiver 7, he played every game. So obviously you hope for another clean bill of health. You just want to see a little bit more consistency from Jaylen Waddle on a per-week basis. And when you have to take a backseat to Tyreek Hill, those types of weeks are going to happen. But we've seen too much talent out of Jaylen Waddle. We've seen too much at this point where he's a dude, most likely, unless you're playing in a 4-person league, he's got to be in your lineup every single week. Jaylen Waddle, 15.7 half PPR points week 1. Blew up week 2, 34.6. 13.1 half PPR points week 3. A couple of bad weeks back-to-back weeks 4 and 5, 4.9, 3.8. But he bounced back nicely for a nice stretch after that. 13.9 week 6, 10.8 week 7, 26.6 week 8, 17 week 9, 8.6 week 10. Not great, but could be worse for what is likely your wide receiver 2. Then he had his week 11 bye week. And then the results were a little up and down to end the season. 11 half PPR points week 12, 1.4 week 13. Obviously, that's not going to get it done. 4.1 week 14 is not much better. But then he helped you out weeks 15 and 16, the first 2 weeks of the playoffs. 18.9 and 22.8. That certainly helped you a lot. That boosted your team for sure. Boosted your team's chances of winning and advancing. He did not help you in week 17 and week 18, though. 6.7 the championship week, 7.8 week 18. So there were some inconsistencies, and obviously Tua was in and out of the lineup with the concussion issues. That probably didn't do Jaylen Waddle any favors. And when you play second fiddle to Tyreek Hill, you're going to have your down weeks. So there is certainly some risk with a team's wide receiver 2 and drafting him that high, drafting him like a wide receiver 1. But Jaylen Waddle has flashed too much talent. He finished as the wide receiver 7 overall for us to worry about those kind of semantics. 75 catches, which was down from the 104 he caught as a rookie. That number was always going to come down after they made the trade to acquire Tyreek Hill. But the yards went way up. He had a 1,015 as a rookie. He went all the way up to 1,356 as a sophomore. So the yards per catch were spectacular last year. Huge improvement from year 1 to year 2. 8 total touchdowns, up from 7 total touchdowns he scored as a rookie in 2021. Stellar player on an efficient passing offense. The Dolphins, it's pretty simple. They go deep and they utilize their 2 studs. They throw the ball to Tyreek Hill and they throw the ball to Jaylen Waddle, and they don't really throw the ball to anybody else because why would you? So we want to see a little bit more consistency from Jaylen Waddle. There were definitely more than a couple clunkers last year. That is the roll of the dice that you deal with when you have a team's wide receiver 2, no matter how talented he is. But we're talking about some of the cream of the crop here. Jaylen Waddle is stellar. Over 200 half PPR fantasy points last year. That is wide receiver 1 production. Yes, it's a little inconsistent, but you roll the dice with a guy like that every single week. And that is it for my wide receiver 1s for the 2023 season. Again, one more time to rattle them off real quick. Cooper Kupp's my wide receiver 1. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 2. Jamar Chase, wide receiver 3. Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 4. Stefon Diggs, wide receiver 5. A.J. Brown, wide receiver 6. CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 7. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 8. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 9. Davante Adams, wide receiver 10. Chris Olave, wide receiver 11. Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver 12. So there you have it. I will have wide receiver 13 to 24 rankings on Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to tune in for that. Theo, I see your last question. We'll get to this, and then I think I'm going to wrap it for the day. Offering to swap from the 103 to 102, not a lot. Not much. not a second round pick, maybe a late third. I know if you need a running back, I hear you. I understand. You want to go ahead and get yourself an opportunity to draft Jahmyr Gibbs. I get it. But I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's an outstanding consolation prize, even if you don't need wide receiver. Even if you're set at wide receiver, I think he's talented enough where you don't break the bank to move up one spot and lose out on him. I would do a third round pick, maybe an additional third round pick like next year. That's about it, man. I'm not giving that much more to move up one spot just to fill a need. And I know Gibbs profiles very well, right? He profiles like an Alvin Kamara type. I get it. But if Jackson Smith and Jigba is your consolation prize, and all you have to do is just take him at the 103, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. If I really need a running back, I'll offer a third, maybe 2/3 to move up one spot, but that's it. I'm not partying with a second round pick to move up one spot. I think Smith and Jigba is a really talented player. And I don't want to break the bank as a result of like trading him plus some potential good depth just to get Gibbs, who has a shorter shelf life than Smith and Jigba. Theo, remember, keep in mind, again, if you're still in here, the topic of conversation at the top of this show, investing in running backs in Dynasty, especially guys who end up first-round picks, the time is going to come when Jahmyr Gibbs is going to want to get paid, and more likely than not, the Lions aren't going to want to do it. And now you have a potential issue where they hold out. It's a risky game investing in running backs like that. I mean, Bijan is in his own conversation, right? From an expected talent perspective, Bijan is in his own conversation. If you have the 101, you're taking him because for the next 4 years, you're hoping you get a guy who's got top 3, top 5 upside at the position. You're hoping Gibbs can get into that conversation. He's a little bit more of a long shot than Bijan is to get in that conversation. Not to say he can't end up being an RB1 ultimately. But this potential issue with a contract dispute down the line is not going to be an issue for Jackson Smith and Jigba the way it is for Jahmyr Gibbs. So I'm not breaking the bank just to move up one spot. And Crumply Heads, what would I offer for Dulcich? A second round pick. Something like that. This offense should be good. This offense should be better. I don't know definitively if Russell Wilson is cooked. But I do know that now that Sean Payton is in town, this offense should be better. It should be much improved. Even if here's the thing, if Russ is cooked, then he should be checking it down a ton to his big target in Greg Dulcich. He is definitely a threat to catch a lot of balls in this offense, especially if the team ultimately moves on from Cortland Sutton, which has been rumored this entire offseason. So a second round pick, maybe not a high second round pick, but one that projects to be a mid to late second round pick, I would offer that up for Dulcich. Something like that. If it's a player, then, a depth running back. Something in that range. But hopefully that helps. We can obviously talk in the Discord if you want to spout off some more thoughts or go back and forth on this a little bit more. But that'll do it for me tonight. Thank you guys again so much for all of the engagement, for coming in and hanging out. Appreciate you guys as always. I will be back on Thursday for my wide receiver 13 to 24 rankings. I will not be on for live streams next week. I will be traveling once again. This time it's for work, not leisure. But I will be having videos rolling out each day. We're officially entering training camp season, so the videos will continue to roll out. I will be available in the Discord when possible, but Thursday will be my last live stream for a week or so, and I'll pick it back up as we officially move into August. But I will be here for Thursday for wide receiver 13 to 24 rankings, 6 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to tune in if you're around. Thank you guys again. As always, appreciate y'all. I'll see you on Thursday. Have a good night, everybody.